Hello. Welcome to Bewick and Company. I'm your host, Frank Bewick. We've got some politics for you to digest. We've got some Republicans here. Mark Colas, who's the chairman of the 16th District Republican Club, not the club, the district, which is primarily Dearborn, and on his left is Mike Casa, who's the chairman of the 17th District, which is Dearborn Heights. Helping in the questions is going to be our managing editor of the Times-Herald, Dick Gillespie, staff writer Harold Moore. Welcome back. Before we get into the questions, Mark, your name is being mentioned quite prominently for a spot as U.S. Attorney, if I'm not mistaken. Is that true?
That's true.
What are your chances?
Well, there are 3 candidates, so I suppose my chances are 1 in 3, at least. I was down in Washington, and I had an interview with the Department of Justice a little while ago, a few weeks ago, and I feel pretty good about it. The other candidates are still in the process of being interviewed. And
you know, a couple of years ago, Ralph Guy had that position.
Yes, he did.
And you saw what happened to him, what's happening to him.
Well, he deserves it.
Yeah. Harold, do you get a question?
Mark, you're the winner. You had good news and bad news. The good news is that you won the Crusoe election with Bill Runco the second time. The bad news might be, the rumor is that he may be moving up to a different job, or trying to move up to a different job. What does that do to you in terms of his seat? How do you go about maintaining that seat in the legislature?
Well, I don't think it's necessarily bad news if he does move up to a higher job, if he decides he wants to run, say, for a higher office. And I think that the question of retaining that seat is really going to require, on the part of our district organization, our Republican organization, a diligent kind of effort to come up with the best possible candidate. And I think that what makes that effort a little different now is the fact that it's now no longer taboo to be Republican in Dearborn. Bill Runco ran strong, Ronald Reagan ran strong, both carried Dearborn overwhelmingly. And in the past, Dearborn's kind of been a democratically oriented town, but now I think you're going to find prominent Dearborn citizens who are no longer reluctant to come out and announce their Republican inclinations. And I think that that's where we will get the ranks of our future candidates.
Does that seem true in the Heights too, Mike?
It sure does. Ronald Reagan carried Dearborn Heights about 66% of the vote in the November election, and although Dick Young was reelected as the state rep out there, we managed to put together a pretty good campaign.
He didn't carry it overwhelmingly, though, did he?
No, he didn't. No,
he didn't carry the margin that Reagan carried.
That's right, and plus the candidate we had run against him didn't have a whole lot of money, a whole lot of organization behind him, and still did very well. But I'm very optimistic about Dearborn Heights because they've got a very good local club put together down there, and it's got the active support of a lot of political people in Dearborn Heights, and I'm very optimistic about its chances.
Speaking of clubs, Mark, why do you have 2 Republican clubs in Dearborn?
Well, I suppose you could say, why do you have 2 restaurants, or why do you have 2 newspapers?
Well, that's a bit different. I mean, we only have 2 parties, Republican and Democrat.
All right. The thrust of the fact in Dearborn is that we want to be an open party. We don't want to close the doors to anyone. Yeah, and if an individual comes along and is interested in organizing additional Republican momentum in another way, if we have an existing club that sees its function as doing one thing, and a guy comes along and says, I see a different function, well, we just don't close him out and say, get lost, we don't want any part of you. We give him the open door to come in and organize a club on what he perceives to be the most effective way possible. Now, you know, you can have different clubs that have different thrusts. One is more toward the grassroots workers, another more toward fundraisers. And
how do you perceive the original club having, what's their thrust?
Well, I don't want to be put in a position trying to characterize them. I think the Dearborn Republican Club has been the springboard for some persons who become prominent and active politically. Mark Judd was chairman of the club at one time. He made a very active run for county commissioner in the city. Bob Ostrowski, who ran for a state senate and is now running for city council, was a former chairman of the club. And I think that you're going to see a lot of that kind of
I don't mean to pursue this, Mark, but I can't help but say that it seems, so everybody says, that the reason for the new club is your new shining knight, Bill Runco. It's mostly his following, so they say that they just couldn't see eye to eye with the old guard, if you will, and they broke away. Is that true?
I would say that Bill Runco is a member of both clubs. He's a paid-up member of both clubs, as a matter of fact. And you know, Bill has his own agenda, and I think he's a very talented politician, and I see him going places. And if he feels that, you know, a second club is a good way to help promote his political aims and the aims of the Republican Party, I think it would be foolish to stand in his way.
My party is probably not as important in politics today as it was in past years. Most candidates today seem to go out and form their own power base, so to speak. What is the function of the party, particularly at the grassroots level today?
Well, you raise a very important point, because I agree with you that the importance of the party has diminished. And from my perspective as a party official, I think that the one function of the party should be to try and increase its influence. The party should serve as a collecting basis for funds, for volunteers, for research, for projects, for manpower. I would like to see the party organization, you know, assume a more dominant role. The candidate is always important, but without the party structure behind it, the candidate is just a more or less of a loose cannon.
Mike, Sandy Levin, I think, is the representative from your district, and he won pretty handily. Is there any hope of the Republicans capturing that seat? Is he as strong in your district as, say, John Dingell is in the 16th?
Well, I think Levin's situation is similar to Dingell in the fact that he's now an incumbent Democrat, and trying to defeat an incumbent congressman from either party is difficult. But where there's a difference, I think, is the fact that Dingell's been entrenched. He's been there for a number of years. This is Levin's. He won in '82, and he's been reelected in '84, so he's relatively new. But it's going to be very difficult to beat him. While I don't agree with his votes on issues in Washington, I must admit he's a smart politician. We didn't field a candidate against him in '84, which was a big mistake, because not only did the Republican Party do so well because of Ronald Reagan, but because we didn't make Sander do the work in his own district. It freed his resources up to help Carl.
There was no candidate against Carl at all?
No, there was no candidate against Sander, and that's one of the things I talked about when I ran for district chairman, was that something's going to have to change. We've already begun to put together a candidate recruitment committee.
Have you got a more active organization than what they had before?
Yeah, it's like night and day. And if you go ahead and ask people in the different communities in our district, you ask people in Dearborn Heights, they'll tell you. I'm trying to work with everyone for both Oakland and Wayne to build up a good organization in the 17th.
Mike, name recognition. Is there any Republican in your district that can come close to the Levin name?
Probably not. It'd be tough to find someone in the state of Michigan that has the type of name recognition that the Levins have. And that is a very important asset that he's got. But the way for us to eventually beat him, we may not be able to beat him in '86, but the way for us to eventually beat him is to do the same sort of things that the Democrats have been doing in that district, and that is raise funds, organize by community, put together a strong political organization, do the kinds of things that you have to do to mount a strong congressional campaign. I think it's true of all congressional districts.
Mike, it's all over about the shouting now that Bill Lucas is going to walk across the aisle to your side. Would you personally support him as a gubernatorial candidate for the Republican Party?
If he was the nominee of our party, I'll certainly support him. I'm not taking any position. I know. I'm not taking any kind of position on the primary, because I don't know who's going to get into the race. But I think that if he indeed does switch parties, I think it'll be great, because for the first time, as long as I've been involved in politics, the Democrats statewide will no longer have to take Wayne County for granted. I mean, Blanchard will have to come in here and campaign to get votes in Wayne County, whereas before it's kind of, well, you know, take it for granted that we'll do very well there.
This is the Blanchard stronghold, though, isn't it? Is that good or bad?
Well, it's a Blanchard stronghold, but Bill Lucas is a Wayne County favorite son.
Mark, how do you feel about Lucas? Do you think he's going to be an asset to the party?
Well, I think there's no question about it. I think when Bill Lucas changes parties and announces it officially, it is going to really, it's going to be a rallying cry, not just in Michigan, but he is going to get nationwide publicity for the
May
Republican
8th, they
Party.
tell me he's going to make his announcement.
I've heard that as well.
Yeah, well, we had him on. He didn't tell us. We had him on the program a couple of weeks back, and he gave us every indication to believe that he's going to make a change.
Gentlemen, the three top offices in Michigan are held by Democrats, the governor and both United States senators. Is, first of all, the governor's race. Is that race as attractive today as it was a year ago?
Okay, let me hang on to the question. We got to take a break. We'll be back in just a minute. Mike, can you remember the question, or do you want to touch on it real
Do you want me to ask it again? All right.
Go ahead.
You have the three top offices in the state are now held by Democrats. A year ago, I think you would have had every Republican in the state trying to run for governor because Blanchard was probably at the low. How is the Republican Party going to recapture any or all those jobs? What do you have to do to get those jobs back?
Well, I mean, if you exclude Governor Milliken, not that you should exclude him, but if you don't count his races, we have not won a statewide race for those offices since 1972. And so we definitely have to do some things differently. One of the things we have to do is field a ticket, which, from the governor on down, which is going to be a strong ticket statewide. One of the things that Spence Abraham has done is that he's encouraged this. We had every House seat. We had a candidate for every House seat in 1984, and I think it helped Republican candidates at all levels because there were more strong Republicans running for every office. In order for us to recapture the governor's seat, we have to, first of all, work together as a party, unite behind our nominee. We haven't done that in the past. We had some problems in 1982. There were some Republicans that felt they couldn't support Dick Headley, and it hurt. It hurt us in an organization sense, and it hurt us as a party as well. We weren't as unified. Whoever our nominee is in August of '86, we have to come out of there strongly united behind that nominee, behind our ticket, and work together as a party.
Mark, just to get on another subject, the rank and file of the union seems to be leaning toward running for the president, for Ronald Reagan. What's the Republicans going to do about that? Are you going to make any effort to go after the union, not the individual, but the top? You're going to try to get them in your fold too, or don't you want them?
I don't know if there's really any hope to pull in, say, the union bosses, if you want to use that kind of a pejorative term. But the rank and file union people are not only leaning toward Reagan, they are leaning toward the Republican Party. And the reason is because as they watch what Ronald Reagan is doing, and they also watch what the people that are opposed to Reagan is doing. Now, your average rank and file union guy doesn't want to see, for example, his taxes increase. He liked Reagan's tax cut, but you had people like John Dingell and Levin who voted against Ronald Reagan's tax cut. And when you get these kind of issues coming to the fore, and they see the Democratic Party being taken over by one different interest group and minority after another, I think they're starting to realize that it's not just Ronald Reagan, but there are other Republicans that have that same attraction.
They like Reagan's tax cut. Why did they put Dingell back in office?
Well, the reason why is because, as Mike mentioned, it's very hard to take a person who's an incumbent and who's been in there as long as Dingell has. And people who will tell you that they supported the tax cut will tell you that they still voted for John Dingell because he's a good guy. Now, part of that is the fault of the National Party in that they're not integrating the campaigns closely enough with the presidential campaign. Part of that is the problem of the local party, however, in that more funds have to be raised. We have to work to get someone with who's going to be able to draw those distinctions with John Dingell and keep working at it. And realistically, we may not win that seat until John Dingell's gone.
Excuse me. What you're saying, I understand it. You're saying that the rank and file union people in Michigan voted for Ronald Reagan because he's a conservative and for a lot of things. Yet on the other hand, the Republican Party put forth Dick Headley, who was equally conservative, equally for cutting taxes and saving the dollar and everything, and he was they trounced him. Why?
Well, I wouldn't say they trounced him. Dick Headley ran stronger in any Midwest industrial city where there was an open governor's race. He ran stronger than any Republican candidate in any other state in the Midwest, in any other of the industrial states.
But he lost.
But he lost. That's right.
And he ran against a relatively unknown person.
Well, I don't think it was relatively unknown. I think the problem with Headley's loss is that there were some Republicans who saw fit not to support the party, and there was a lot of dissension on relevancies. Pardon?
A lot of women chose not to vote for him.
A number of vocal women chose
He
not
got
to.
in big trouble with the women.
No.
Some women.
Some of them. Well, enough. I mean, look at Mrs. Milliken. You know, went over and supported.
Well, yeah, but I was referring to Republicans, basically.
He had one segment of the party that just sat on the side and watched the election, really, didn't he?
That's true. And that's something I don't think you're going to see happen again. I think the party today could nominate Dick Headley again today if they wanted to, and that would not happen because the whole tone of the state party organization under Spence Abraham is completely different. It's inclusive. Everybody has a voice.
Mike, what kind of a shot has Bill Lucas got at the gubernatorial nomination for the party if he comes in?
Well, I think it's going to depend upon who his opponents are. If you have opponents like Guy Vanderjack or Brooks Patterson or Dan Murphy who've been in the Republican Party all their lives, it might be difficult for Lucas to make the case that I should be your nominee now.
Do you think the party bigwigs are tempting Lucas by promising him this to get him over?
No, I think we've encouraged him to join our party. I know that that's true for Republican leadership throughout Michigan. But I think the decision to run for governor was his. I think he's the one that came up with it, and he let it be known that he was considering it. And I think to a lot of people who think a Lucas candidacy would really broaden our base, it would be a good idea.
I think on that point that you're going to find that the leaders statewide in the Republican Party are going to look to see if there's a consensus developing around a single candidate early in this governor's race. And if there is, I think they're going to work to try and avoid a bitter, divisive primary, because that way their candidate can start running for governor right off the bat instead of waiting until August after the primary.
And also without hearing his fellow candidates' remarks come back to haunt him in the general election.
Sure, exactly.
You said one thing interesting, Mike. Do I imply from what you said about the candidates that the Republican Party might be more interested in putting forth what is considered to be a true blue Republican than putting forth a candidate who could win?
No, what I said was Lucas may face that problem wherever he goes, but questions for people who aren't as sure as I am, for one, about how true a Republican he'll become. I mean, will he work for the entire ticket? Not that I have that question, but it's a question that probably will come up to him.
Is sort of the thing that the old guard Republican Party said about Governor Milliken all during his entire term in office?
No, it was an entirely different case, because there you had a sitting governor who did have some problems convincing people that he should be the party. I was one of the ones he couldn't convince.
But he won very handily every time.
Yes, he did. He would win. But the years that he won, 70, 74, 78, you look at we didn't do too well in other parts of the state. Bob Griffin lost in 1978. In 70 and 74, Democrats maintained their control of the legislature, and they did it in 78.
But again, it was very, not anybody that in contact with media at all was very aware of the fact of the unrest within the Republican Party. I mean,
Sure.
Isn't that you people's fault as much as the governor's? I mean, in that you are the party per se?
Well, I don't think so. Of course, Mark was the district chairman back when he was governor. I think you were. I'm not sure.
Well, I don't speak of you
but
specifically, but I mean,
Right.
I mean your role as district chairman.
Well, I frankly believe that if there was that dissension, and there was, it's got to be his fault, because he's the leader of the party, and it's up to him to keep peace within the party. He's a sitting governor. He has a lot of resources at his disposal. Spence Abraham, who's just a party chairman, has done, I think, much more than Milliken ever did to unite the party. He's done a great job in that regard. It's probably his greatest accomplishment. For the first time in my political lifetime, we have a party that's relatively united. I've never seen that before.
Earl, you got a question?
Yeah. If you believe the latest polls, for the first time since Buffalo was a flag station, the Republican Party is the majority party in Michigan. First of all, is that true? And secondly, if it is true, does that mean you have to campaign and you have to operate differently than when you were a minority party?
I think it is true. The polls I've seen bear that out. And what it makes as far as a shift in emphasis is that we can start emphasizing tickets rather than individuals. We can start selling the concept that the Republican Party stands for certain things: lower taxes, less government regulation, less spending by government. We can start emphasizing themes so that the people understand that this applies to all Republicans, and that's what's going to make the Republican ticket stronger and stronger in this state over the next 10 years.
Let's hold it right there for just a second. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back. In the few seconds we've got left, Mark, you mentioned low taxes in stating national platforms and what turns people on. Economists tell us that that is one of the big reasons for our big deficits, and that's going to kill us down the road. How do you respond to that?
Well, we've had higher and higher taxes for 20 years up, and all the time we raised taxes, our deficits got bigger and bigger.
Nothing like they are now, though.
Well, no, but the fact is, every time we raised taxes, the deficit got bigger. The one thing that's been consistent, that's gone along with the bigger deficits, is the higher government spending. The way to cut taxes, the way to cut the deficit, is to cut taxes and to cut spending, because the spending is what causes the deficit.
Mike?
Agree with that?
Sure.
Go ahead and answer.
Well, yeah, I agree. The fact that taxes were cut in order to stimulate economic growth. If spending levels are too high, I think the way to do it is to reduce spending as opposed to raising taxes and then cutting off economic growth.
I was curious. Speaking of polls, one of the polls took the top Republicans, throwing Bill Lucas in it, and they claimed that Bill Lucas was by far the front runner, and Dan Murphy, a choice Republican by many, had something like 3 or 5% recognition. It was a recognition type of poll across the state. How do you answer to that?
Well, I think probably his name recognition certainly isn't as high as Lucas is, but I don't know if it's that low. I mean, I'm sure it's much higher than that. He's certainly well known in the Tri-County area. Probably has some
this
ID
is a
problems
statewide
statewide.
poll.
I mean, I can't answer. I don't know how that poll was conducted. I'm not sure whether it's too high or too low.
Are you aware of that poll? Mark?
I'm aware of that poll. I would think that Lucas would have a higher name recognition factor. He's been out there, in effect, campaigning, in a sense, for some time.
The Senate race.
We're down to 1 minute.
Mr. Regal. Can you beat Mr. Regal?
I say yes. I think that Jack Lausman may run again. A very bright congressman from the western side of the state, Mark Siljander, may be running in that race. And Brooks Patterson may get into it, or Bill Lucas, if one of them isn't governor.
Well, before we get into that, both of you had indicated that you want to give a telephone number out to our audience in case somebody wanted to join your particular club or group or organization. Mark, do you want to give your telephone number?
Okay, the best number to give if you're in the Dearborn area is the office of Perry Christie, who's the Wayne County portion chairman. His number is 336.
Make it quick.
336-8400.
Mike?
My number is 352-3557.
Thank you very much. Thanks for watching.